Hello everyone and welcome back to Dinar Flash News, your source for cutting through the clutter and gaining a clear perspective on the latest economic developments. I strongly encourage you to stay with me for the next few minutes, as the viewpoint we are about to explore could fundamentally alter your understanding of the current situation surrounding your assets. We are all aware that the digital landscape has been saturated recently with a tide of anxiety, uncertainty, and intense conjecture. With every click, it seems there are new alerts, online discussions, and speculative posts forecasting an imminent currency redenomination or a severe, sudden loss of value. I recognize that this environment generates considerable stress and doubt for many of you, perhaps even leading to second thoughts about your initial involvement in this market. Yet, it is crucial we stop and seriously contemplate an alternative scenario. What if this pervasive wave of alarming information is fundamentally mistaken? What if, contrary to predictions of collapse, the underlying economic signals are actually indicating a path toward potential stability and long-term maturation? Today, I aim to guide you through a detailed examination, using straightforward concepts, to articulate why a destructive redenomination of the Iraqi currency is improbable. We will investigate the reasons the present panic is largely without foundation, and why informed individuals who focus on verifiable data may find themselves in a more advantageous position than they assume as we progress through 2025. By the end of our conversation, you will possess a significantly clearer picture of the true state of affairs, grounded not in emotion but in the reality of structural economics. Let's start by deconstructing the terminology that is fueling so much fear. A great deal of the apprehension about the dinar's future originates from a few alarming terms that are frequently used without precision. Words like devaluation, collapse, switch, and LOP are often deployed without proper context or a nuanced understanding of their macroeconomic implications. In common discourse, when people hear LOP, they instantly picture their holdings becoming worthless, which triggers a panic reaction. However, the reality is that a sovereign currency's value is not a simple toggle that a government can flip to erase wealth overnight. In the vast majority of nations, valuation is carefully managed by central banks and is underpinned by tangible economic performance, international trade agreements, and foreign reserve assets. Before we allow ourselves to be consumed by these apocalyptic rumors, it is imperative that we distinguish between sensationalized hype and factual reality. This separation is the central objective of our discussion today. We will not be building our analysis on hearsay, gossip, or the emotionally driven content that proliferates on social media. Instead, we will break down the situation based on the actual operational principles of currencies, economies, and financial systems, with a specific focus on their current application in Iraq. The primary source of current anxiety for many is simply historical context. There is no denying that Iraq has faced a tumultuous past, marked by conflict, sanctions, and profound instability. This difficult history often leads external observers to assume that negative outcomes are inevitable. This historical baggage causes many to believe a sudden devaluation is perpetually imminent. But here is a critical reality that is frequently overlooked. Despite these immense challenges over the decades, the currency has endured. The institutions tasked with managing the economy, including the banks, government bodies, and foreign trade partnerships, have not only persisted but have also adapted, reorganized, and achieved a degree of stabilization. The mere fact that the currency continues to exist and circulate in both domestic and international commerce today is a powerful testament to its inherent durability. If a complete systemic collapse were destined to happen, it would most likely have occurred during the peak of past crises, yet the framework remains intact and functional. Perhaps more importantly, we must examine the underlying incentives at play. Executing a harmful redenomination or devaluation would directly sabotage this hard-won resilience. Such an action would shatter trust, not only among the nation's own citizens but across the entire international community that engages in trade, investment, or strategic planning with the country. From a historical standpoint, deliberately damaging one's own currency has never aligned with a nation's long-term interests, particularly for a country actively working to rebuild and reintegrate into the global marketplace. The fundamental objective of any recovering nation is to foster confidence, and a sudden annihilation of currency value achieves the precise opposite. Now, let's address the central pillar of this entire discussion: oil. It is impossible to have a meaningful conversation about the Iraqi economy without acknowledging its massive energy sector. Iraq ranks among the world's top oil producers, which provides a substantial, tangible advantage in managing national revenue. The currency is effectively bolstered by this commodity because oil is priced globally in major reserve currencies, primarily the US dollar. Exporting crude oil ensures a constant influx of foreign reserves into the country's financial system. This stream of hard currency does not simply disappear, it functions as a stabilizing backbone that supports the value of the local currency. This relationship is especially significant in periods where global oil demand exerts influence on currency markets worldwide. Iraq's capacity to earn foreign currency through oil exports acts as a massive financial safety net. This is not a factor to be lightly dismissed or ignored when evaluating rumors. For any drastic, harmful currency action to occur, particularly a destructive devaluation of this oil-backed inflow, would almost certainly need to evaporate or contract dramatically. Currently, there is no credible evidence suggesting this is happening. Because of this reliable petrodollar pipeline, the economy maintains a level of predictability that other nations lacking such natural resources simply do not enjoy. To create the mental image, imagine you own a valuable property, and every single month you receive a substantial, reliable income that covers all associated costs. That predictability gives you the confidence to maintain the asset, knowing you can manage its financial obligations over the long term. The same core principle applies to this sovereign economy. Oil revenue provides consistent inflows of foreign currency, which enables the central bank and government to sustain operations, back their reserves, and uphold general economic stability. This creates a powerful buffer that greatly diminishes the necessity for rash currency interventions or forced devaluations. As long as these inflows remain steady and current production and export levels indicate they will, the currency possesses a built-in defense mechanism against destabilizing actions. Now, let's discuss the systems that operate largely out of public view but whose impact is deeply felt: the banking system, government fiscal policy, international trade agreements, and regulatory frameworks. These elements function as the skeleton and support network behind the physical banknotes. In stable nations, these systems evolve gradually, adapt to pressures, and work to prevent systemic shocks. In this specific case, particularly following the turbulence of past decades, many of these systems have already been subjected to extreme stress testing. They have been forced to adapt to incredibly difficult circumstances, and they have done so in a manner that protects the integrity of the financial system, or at the very least, makes catastrophic measures highly unlikely. For someone to wake up tomorrow to a massively devalued currency, it would imply a cascading failure across multiple layers of institutional infrastructure simultaneously. This would entail banks collapsing, oil revenue evaporating, and international trade grinding to a halt. This scenario is not merely unlikely based on current data, it is virtually unthinkable when you observe the trajectory of recovery that is presently underway. Consider for a moment the consequences for investor confidence, both domestic and international. If the government were to enact a severe currency devaluation, trust would evaporate almost instantly. Foreign investors, who are crucial for reconstruction efforts, would seek immediate exits or demand heavy risk discounts. Banks would severely tighten lending, trade agreements would falter, and inflation would almost certainly spike to unmanageable levels. Individuals and entities holding savings or investments in the local currency would confront not only a loss of value but also associated economic chaos, price instability, and widespread financial hardship. We are not discussing a minor market adjustment, but a devastating blow to a nation with this specific history and these specific ambitions of reintegrating into the global community. Such an event would critically impair long-term economic recovery and growth. From political, economic, and social standpoints, the resulting damage would be far too great to justify. In this light, A reckless redenomination makes absolutely no logical sense for the current administration. Their stated goal is to construct a stable future, not to dismantle the progress achieved in recent years. I am aware of what many of you are thinking, but I read it on social media, or they say this time it's really going to happen. This is where we confront the core issue of rumor versus reality on platforms saturated with half-truths, fear, and unverified speculation. It is remarkably easy to manufacture panic. Individuals with little to no insider knowledge or formal economic training make bold predictions to generate web traffic. They depict worst-case scenarios because fear creates a sense of urgency, and urgency drives online engagement. These predictions then spread rapidly. However, the currency of rumors is not backed by facts, logic, or institutional realities. The chasm between an unsubstantiated tweet and an official Treasury report is immense. If we treat social media hype as factual information, we predispose ourselves to cycles of unnecessary alarm. This is why it is essential to take a step back, evaluate the fundamental economic indicators, and ask a critical question: does this alarming claim withstand scrutiny when examined against real economic pressures? Or is it merely another attention-seeking, alarmist post? As someone with a stake in this market, you must filter out the noise by concentrating on actual data. Key metrics include oil production levels, export figures, foreign reserve totals, and international trade activity. Official statements from recognized financial authorities and concrete developments in banking reforms are measurable, trackable, and have a verifiable history. In stark contrast, rumors are typically vague, relying on non-committal words like maybe, soon, or might. These terms carry zero accountability. Your focus should be on information you can independently verify, comparing it with established historical patterns. Ask yourself direct questions. Is there concrete evidence of a systemic crisis? Is oil revenue precipitously declining? Are banks collapsing or defaulting on their obligations? Thus far, the answers to these fundamental questions remain a consistent and firm number. This is not to suggest that the currency will experience a dramatic surge in value tomorrow. However, the necessary preconditions for a destructive redenomination simply do not appear to be present. Let's examine the more recent context, particularly as we navigate through 2025. The global economy has experienced significant volatility. Oil prices have fluctuated, demand patterns have shifted, and nations worldwide have faced currency-related stresses. Yet, despite this international turbulence, this specific currency has maintained a notable degree of stability. This resilience is, in itself, a powerful signal. It indicates that the mechanisms of foreign exchange inflow, export revenue, internal fiscal balance, and coordination between the government and central bank are functioning as intended. Even when confronted with external pressures, the fundamental economic framework has demonstrated an ability to hold. This suggests underlying resilience that should not be underestimated. This stability is not an accidental occurrence. It is the result of deliberate design. It is a managed currency, supported by real export income, robust, if imperfect, institutions, and strategically important trade relationships. What about the ongoing efforts toward reform? In recent years, there have been clear indications of modernization within the banking infrastructure. International banking relationships are being strengthened, and regulatory standards are being updated and enhanced. These initiatives are not laying the groundwork for a redenomination. They are building systemic credibility to ensure more efficient and secure financial operations, both domestically and across borders. An improved banking sector facilitates easier transactions, fosters greater trust from foreign financial institutions, and increases overall transparency. None of these objectives align with a strategy of sudden, destructive devaluation. On the contrary, all observable signs point toward preparations for sustained, long-term economic growth, not short-term shock therapy. Another frequent point of confusion among concerned investors is the conflation of two entirely different scenarios: revaluation and a LOP. A revaluation, which involves an increase in the currency's value relative to others, is fundamentally different from a LOP, which is a forced reduction or deletion of value. It is understandable that many hope for a positive valuation change when they encounter rumors. Hope is a powerful force, but what truly matters is the actual economic impact of any change. Would it strengthen the currency or weaken it? Based on the observable factors of strong oil reserves, consistent fiscal flows, and institutional stability, the more realistic future trajectory points toward measured, gradual growth. If the government does take action, its likely aim will be to enhance credibility, not to induce panic. For those who have been observing this situation for the long term, patience remains one of your most significant assets. Unlike higher-risk, short-term speculations, participation in the currency of a recovering nation is rarely about instantaneous, dramatic windfalls. It is more analogous to planting a seed, providing consistent care, allowing time for growth, and anticipating steady development over an extended period. For those who entered this market expecting rapid, spectacular returns, this gradual process can understandably be frustrating. However, if your mindset is oriented toward the long term, and if you have confidence in the potential for stability, gradual development, and eventual global reintegration, then maintaining your course may be a rational approach. Making decisions based on panic, such as selling out of fear, is often the very action that crystallizes losses. The psychological pressure in these situations is very real. In times of uncertainty, fear propagates rapidly. People hear rumors, observe others panicking, and feel a reflexive urge to join in. This fear can compel them to make impulsive, emotionally driven decisions to sell, convert, or abandon their position hastily. However, fear-based decisions within financial markets are seldom wise. They can lead to undervaluing your assets or missing potential long-term gains. This is why it is critically important to pause, breathe, reaffirm your understanding of the economic fundamentals, and consciously avoid being carried away by the hype cycle. In the vast majority of cases, calm, rational, and deliberate decision-making yields better outcomes over time. For those who still feel uncertain, here is a straightforward checklist to consult. Is there credible, verified reporting indicating that oil revenue is collapsing? Are major banks in the country defaulting? Is there tangible evidence of massive domestic bank withdrawals or widespread currency panic among the local population? Are key international trade partners terminating their agreements? Has the government officially declared a plan to forcibly devalue the currency? If the answer to all these questions is no, then the concept of an imminent redenomination remains a speculative hypothesis, not a confirmed policy plan. If you decide to continue holding, it is prudent to treat this as one component within a diversified overall strategy. Avoid concentrating all your resources in a single asset class. This approach ensures that, regardless of when or if a valuation change occurs, your financial well-being is protected. Conversely, if stability continues to take root and is accompanied by strong economic growth, you would be well positioned to potentially benefit. The key is less about perfectly timing the market and more about exercising consistent, informed patience. We must also consider the crucial element of global perception. For a country to remain integrated into the global economy, its currency must be viewed as credible. Nations are hesitant to engage in trade with partners whose currencies are highly volatile or prone to sudden, arbitrary devaluation. For this nation to successfully rebuild, attract foreign capital, and secure international agreements, it requires trust, and that trust is fundamentally built upon a foundation of stability. For this reason alone, any reckless monetary move would be profoundly counterproductive to its strategic goals. Furthermore, consider the direct impact on inflation and the cost of living within the country. Even if a currency were to be devalued, the domestic population and economy would bear the brunt of this suffering. Consumer prices would skyrocket, the cost of imported goods would become prohibitive, and the value of domestic savings would be severely eroded. This kind of economic pain disproportionately affects ordinary citizens. For a government focused on long-term recovery, imposing such hardship would carry an exceedingly high political cost. In summary, a destructive redenomination would not only harm foreign investors, it would inflict deep wounds on the local populace, and the resulting political and social repercussions would be untenable. To be perfectly clear, this analysis is not an attempt to whitewash reality or pretend that risk does not exist. Participation in any market carries inherent risk, and this is no exception. External shocks, unforeseen geopolitical events, and shifts in global oil demand can all impact the economy. However, these inherent risks do not automatically translate to an imminent threat denomination. Acknowledging risk means you commit to staying informed, remaining vigilant, and basing your decisions on a careful analysis of data. Making decisions based on panic-driven speculation is not a viable strategy. It is merely fear disguised as a sense of urgency. For those watching this situation and contemplating their next steps, the advice is simple. Do not rush. Do not blindly follow the most vocal commentators in online forums. Diligently track official reports and announcements. Maintain a watchful eye on key export trends and economic indicators. Recognize that long-term stability is often a gradual, undramatic process. It builds incrementally, day by day, and policy by policy. It constructs a foundation that may not promise a sudden windfall, but one that significantly diminishes the probability of a catastrophic collapse. Stay informed, maintain a calm perspective, and continue to anchor your decisions in verifiable facts.